After more than 10 years on the spiritual search, it struck me a few months ago that the fact I was still listening to a lot of question and answer sessions, pointers, reading spiritual books, and I'd read quite a few over those years as well. It struck me that I was looking in the wrong direction still. I was still looking for something external to provide the internal recognition, if that makes sense. And I realised that over the years I'd become somewhat addicted to that veiling and unveiling, that feeling that I'd lost it, only to feel that you've recovered something when you hear a pointer that resonates, or a question and answer you see from one of the teachers seems to strike home, only for it to disappear. It's almost like a gap in the clouds. The sunlight comes through and that relief becomes quite addictive. But that's really not what was being pointed to. When I looked back over some correspondence I had with John Wheeler over 10 years ago now, and he even said flat out in those emails that what you're looking for is not going to be in a YouTube video. What you are is not going to be in a pointer. It's not going to be in the satsang. You don't need to go on retreat. You just need to take a handful of pointers that resonate and look to where they're pointing. And I realised I'd completely overlooked that, even from day one. It's obviously the conditioning of the mind has a certain way of acting, and I hadn't realised or got wise to that. But as we go into 2026, I would suggest it's been such a relief to the end, and the end of seeking from where I'm sitting here was to start looking for myself. It's almost like Sailor Bob, the late Sailor Bob, he said, you have to do the investigation, you have to do the work. But so I noticed that I was really sort of handing off that work almost like a proxy to just go, I'll figure this out with the next question, the next book will provide it for me. Sure enough, many of them are pointing in the right direction, some more than others. It depends what you resonate with. But I would urge you, as you go into the new year, if you've been on the path for many years, and you know every pointer back to front, upside down, you don't need another satsang. You don't need another spiritual book. You don't need a pointer. You need to take some time and look to where it's pointing in your own experience. Look for it for yourself, discover it for yourself. And if you're just starting out on the spiritual path, you've kind of resonated, you maybe read some Eckhart Tolle, or you're interested in the power of now, and or maybe that's just not quite cutting it for you anymore and you want a bit more depth. Just grab yourself a few pointers that resonate initially. You don't need more than a handful. Intuitively which ones sing with the truth, and just in your own experience go to where they're pointing. Don't just take that momentary relief that the pointer gives, or the next question and answer gives that you find on YouTube. It doesn't take that much to be pointed in the right direction and to go there in your experience. And as it always says, it's just a very slight case of mistaken identity. Even right now, wherever you are, you don't need to go anywhere to find your being. Wherever you are right now, your being, it's tangible. You can't say that you're not, You can't necessarily say what you are, but you definitely can't say that you're not. And you don't need to know what you are, it's that you are. And that knowing, that sense of existence, sense of presence awareness, the late Sailor Bob called it, is tangible. And that is not the presence awareness of a person. It's as simple as that. It's the presence awareness of the being. Go there. It's never been a person. At best, the person is a stream of thought, a fiction conditioned in from a young age, innocently. And its associated feelings and emotions that go along with that, a certain way of looking. But even when that's occurring, you are present prior to that. And that presence prior isn't the presence of a person, it's the presence of the being that you are. And I would start there. Enjoy that. And I'm not sure if that's been of any help, but... Oh, and one more thing is when you have your doubts and your questions, is to get them answered for yourself. I found this revolutionary in terms of turning my attention in the right direction, if that makes sense, relaxing the attention. We've all heard, sinking back and recognition and realizing, awakening. We've heard all the terms. But get your questions answered for yourself. There's only so much taking second-hand information, if that makes sense, really seems to sink in. For some it might, for others you'll probably be stuck consuming spiritual content for years before you realise that all you needed was the basics at the beginning to see where all these are pointing to and to investigate that. And also, if you have any questions, for what they're worth, I can always try and help. I feel like I've been on the round of the carousel many, many times, so I can maybe point you in the, not necessarily home, but definitely maybe where you want to be looking in terms of getting yourself on the right track. Because once you are, then it becomes so obvious. And I know in the initial stages how annoying it is when you hear it's so clear, it's so obvious. And it's not clear and obvious to me. I'm still just doing the same old thing over and over. But again, it's just normally it's just that slight misidentification, assuming that sense of presence is the sense of presence of a person. It's not. It's the sense of presence of the being that you're looking for, the being that you are, the being that you've always been, regardless of condition. That's there prior to any state, during any state, and requires no state for you to get into. Anyway, I've rambled on enough now. Enjoy the rest of your day.